Is it gender-affirming care or life-destroying malpractice? Today, we explore the dark side of the politicizing of our medical systems with sexual agendas and the damaging consequences to kids. But it's not just in far-off places where this experimentation is happening. We see this agenda being embraced by children's hospitals right here in Virginia. The good news is, though, there are brave whistleblowers willing to buck the system and sacrifice their careers to protect kids. We're going to talk about this and more. Welcome to Speak Up Virginia, equipping you to speak up on the life, family, and freedom issues that matter most to you. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candi Cushman. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you with us for Speak Up Virginia. And I have in the hot seat today my colleague, Todd. Glad to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be back.
Now, I know you've been having an emotional time of it lately, dropping off two boys to the college dorm.
We got them back to college, and then we also had two girls that started school this week as well. So it's been a busy time in the household.
Well, it's been kind of a sobering atmosphere in our office because a lot of people are taking their kids to college. What's that been like for you guys?
Yeah, I think we all been kind of getting together and consoling each other and patting each other on the back, saying it's going to be okay. Yeah, this is our second year of it. We actually have one that is a third year, and then we have another that's in his second year, and so we're getting used to this. And now I think when the next two, the younger two, come along and go into college, then I'm sure it'll be emotional again. So
yeah. All right. Well, we have some very sobering topics to go over today. There's some good news, some significant things mixed in there with what's happening on the transgender front. But I thought, considering all the seriousness of what we have to talk about, we should start off on somewhat of a lighter note. So why don't you tell us what's been going on? Because, well, I'll just say, there are some weeks when you read the news headlines and you look at it and you think, this has got to be satire. It's the Babylon Bee. This has got to be the Babylon Bee. That's what I always think. And then I click on it and I say, okay, it's not the Babylon Bee. It really is that crazy.
Yeah, I guess I kind of had that when I was watching the DNC convention this week. And I thought, this is a Babylon Bee. And then, it pops up, nope, not the bee. And that's what was happening with this bus that was coming to the DNC providing abortions and vasectomies and this inflatable IUD that's outside. I'm just thinking, how crazy is this? I don't know. It seems like it's like back in the days when people worship Molech outside the walls of Jerusalem. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Yeah.
I mean, you got to understand, people, we're talking about a mobile unit. Like pulling up out there saying, come get your abortion, your vasectomy. Right. I don't even know how that's safe.
I don't either. Contrast that. I was thinking about that this morning. Contrast it with the Little League World Series that's happening at the same time. You have families that are out vacationing. Kids are having fun playing a game of baseball. The tradition of riding the cardboard boxes down the hill. Life is about family and enjoying life. And then you have, in contrast, this bus outside the DNC convention that's all about taking life away, ending life, not having families. And it's just, what a contrast.
I'll admit what I was thinking, and that was when we saw some of the Republican leaders backing away from a strong pro-life stance. And I thought, I still don't know why people were backing away from that, when we look at what is happening at the Democrat convention. They've gone a completely other direction, out there celebrating just full-fledged, unlimited abortion, celebrating it, mobile units, the sterilization. We gain nothing by backing away talking about life.
Yeah, you're right. We talked about that last time we were together about the platform, about how they stripped out really good language. And this is where we see the culture going now, is this contrast at the DNC.
We've got to keep talking about life and be unashamed about it. So by the time you're hearing this, the DNC will be pretty much wrapped up. But there's been other news coming out about the Harris campaign. And we haven't done an inconceivable for a while, and I think we have some good nominations for today. So let's just get into that segment. Well, it's that time again. Time for our Inconceivable Moments Award. This is where we're featuring examples of the absolute lunacy and craziness that happens when cultural leaders try to give guidance completely apart from biblical principles. And we're calling this the Liberals' Most Inconceivable Moments Award.
Inconceivable!
Okay, next up for today's Inconceivable nomination is this job application page on Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign website. Now, we're going to show a picture here on the screen, and you'll notice that in this job application form, the Harris campaign is asking people to indicate their pronouns. There's at least 9 listed here. Now, we all know this is something we've been seeing. We go into our doctor's office, you know, the leftists want us getting asked our pronouns everywhere we go. So we see this in the different places we go. But the Harris campaign really has upped the ante here because they've added these unheard of options, at least to most of us regular folks. We have not heard of any of this. And they apparently even have a custom option, like you can put your custom pronoun.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So that's in there. But specifically, you'll notice we have up on the screen here a new pronoun, or at least I haven't heard of it before, who. It's listed as a pronoun option. Now, it sounds like I'm saying, for those that aren't looking on the screen, it sounds like I'm saying who, like WHO, which would be the pronunciation for an actual pronoun in the English language. But what you see is, the way it's spelled here is just HU. It kind of looks like something from the periodic table.
Well, I don't know. I was looking at it and thinking that it was like pronounced HUH, like, huh?
Yeah.
Because that's about what I'm doing is scratching my head when I see all of these pronouns that are being added to this list. I mean, this is just crazy. This is ridiculous. I think you pronounce it with a Y in there, like Hugh, like Hugh.
Yes, and I'm trying to see the meaning of these things. It looks like it's supposed to maybe refer to gender neutral, and the idea is that, well, I'm human.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it's also, it's referencing that you're part of the human race. And so I need a pronoun to remind me of that. I already know I'm part of the human race.
Don't we? Yeah, okay. Well, let me just, before I get into that, there's another one on here you'll see, Faye, F-A-E, or fairer. Who's the fairest of them all? That's what I think of.
And so it's my understanding that this is supposed to be for those who identify as fairies or Wicca. Is that
is one explanation?
Is that one? Now I don't know. Maybe I got that from the Bee or the Babylon Bee or somebody.
No, I actually saw that as a legit explanation. But I saw there's different things. No one seems to be in agreement what it means. I saw one site saying that it was people that are fluid. I mean, I don't know what that means. I mean, I know what they say it means.
You're trying to get us to explain liberal logic about gender identity, and I don't know if there's any way for us to be able to explain it.
I always find the idea of fluid particularly disturbing because that just means you're doing whatever you want to on any given day, which cannot be a healthy form of living.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Okay. I will say I'm assuming that you have a better chance of getting hired by the Harris campaign if you pick the most exotic pronoun choice possible.
I mean, yes. I mean, look at the current administration. We've seen a guy that dresses up as a woman and steals women's luggage.
Yeah.
We have, this could open the door for drag queens.
I don't want to think about what his identifiers were.
I mean, I think the most creative pronoun and description probably gives you a leg up on someone else.
Especially if you're creative enough to make your custom one.
That's right, yeah.
All right, well, getting back to the pronunciation with the Hugh one, I mean, supposed to indicate that it's humanity. Don't we already have enough sufficient pronouns in the English language to signify that we are all human?
I think it's safe to say that. I think we know. And I think a great illustration of this, it sounds a lot like the Abbott and Costello.
It's time for a reprisal.
Yeah, I think so.
On the St. Louis team, we have who's on first, what's on second, I don't know's on third.
That's what I want to find out. I want you to tell me the names of the fellas on the St. Louis team.
I'm telling you, who's on first, what's on second, I don't know's on third.
You know the fellas' names?
Yes.
Well, then who's playing first?
Yes.
I mean the fellow's name on first base.
Who?
The fellow playing first base for St. Louis.
Who?
The guy on first base.
Who is on first?
Well, what are you asking me for?
I love that clip. That is just a brilliant piece of comedy right there. But you know, sadly today we're kind of experiencing that type of confusion.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I guess kind of bring it back to a serious moment. I mean, this is sort of the confusion that we're seeing in our culture. This is what's being pushed on our kids in schools, our healthcare system, and this is what you could expect potentially with this administration if they do come to the presidency. You know,
I think the signals are pretty clear there.
Yeah.
But I think a sad part also is it reflects this deep level of just a deeper level of chaos, of complete lostness that people don't have a sense, especially the younger generation, just with what they're getting from our culture. There's not this sense of who we were created to be at a deeper level. How are we figuring out our identity at a soul level? There's no longer that sense or that foundation that we are known by God, created by God. That's what's concerning.
Yeah, one of the things I've kind of observed is that you have this situation where they're looking at people and they're identifying whether or not you are worthy of living or dying. They're looking at you and saying you're worthy based on your physical appearance, and then where you use locker rooms and bathrooms. And what I want to say to them, I wish I could if I had the opportunity, is that, God, He sent His Son to die on you. You are worthy of life. He died on the cross for you. He said that you are beautifully and wonderfully made in His image, that you don't need to change. You are created for a specific purpose. This whole, the idea that we have a culture where men and women play significant roles and He created us to play into those roles, and that's a wonderful thing.
And that He knows every part. You are fully known by God. Yeah, I really think that is the redemptive message that we need to be countering, to all this confusion. Well, obviously, we're going to give the Inconceivable Award today to the Harris campaign for introducing us to a whole new level of Orwellian-style pronouns. All right, well, with that said, we're going to go right into just some more serious discussion today, but it still has to do with the topic of this transgender ideology that's being pushed in our culture. And Todd, you really helped us address some significant developments in this area in an email that you wrote, and that has to do with what is going on right here in Virginia with children's hospitals in the name of so-called gender-affirming care. Just to set this up a little bit, even though we see this happening, even though in Europe, other countries are going the complete opposite direction that we're going here in the U.S. They are acknowledging the documented harm and risk that these so-called gender-affirming procedures, puberty blocking, gender transition surgeries, the extreme risk that it does pose to otherwise healthy kids. So, but some of our most respected and revered hospitals right here in the U.S. and even in the Commonwealth are going full steam the other direction.
And that's what we've seen. We have children's hospitals in the Richmond area, at the VCU, in the UVA Children's Hospital that are performing or providing gender-affirming care, and I use quotes around that, for young minors. And this is these are young kids that are clearly struggling with some type of mental challenge or trauma maybe in their lives, and they desperately need care. And let me just say that these children's hospitals do great work. They provide great medical services, but in these cases, they're providing so-called gender-affirming care that actually lead to more harm than good.
And I think your point that almost all of these kids do absolutely have these underlying issues that aren't sufficiently addressed.
And that's what's problematic, is that we think that this is what's going to resolve the issue to help them with their...
They're meant to feel that way.
They're meant to that if you go through with these hormones, these puberty blockers, to the point of even medical surgeries, that this is going to help you overcome that. And there are always underlying issues that are leading up to this and contribute to the challenges and the trauma that they're going through.
And the reality is this is not a miracle cure, and we have stats, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But tell us about VCU real quick. Well,
we heard about the fact that they are offering gender affirming care services, and so it step by step. I mean, they walk you through it. They start off with hormone treatments, prescription medications, and then it appears that they're helping facilitate some type of medical surgeries for these young minors. And this is happening right here in the city of Richmond.
Yeah, and we're putting this, I think we had up on the screen here, what's on the website. They're saying they're offering now.
So they're not hiding it. They clearly have it on their website. We just went online. We pulled and did a screenshot of it. Yeah, and so it clearly is being advertised.
Okay, they're not the only ones though. Right?
They're not the only ones. We even know, and we've reported on this in the past as well, that UVA has been engaged in this, and probably a little bit longer maybe than the VCU hospital.
And these are their children's hospitals.
These are children's hospitals, yes. And so what you have are these young minors, accompanied by their parents, who are going into these to these doctors' offices and saying that they're dealing with this gender dysphoria or these trauma, where they think they literally are, if they're a boy, that they're a girl, or if they're a girl, that they're a boy, and they want help to help transition to identify with the biological sex they think they are.
Okay, there was a controversy that happened a few years ago when a YouTube video surfaced of a doctor from from UVA Children's Hospital. Tell us about that.
Yeah, she was given a presentation on the program that they provide there at UVA, and she was going through step by step of what they offer. But I thought what was really interesting when she was talking about explaining the process, explaining what was involved from the treatments, from the testosterone or the puberty blockers, or even the medical surgeries, when they were talking about it in the context of these minors, that she admitted that they don't fully comprehend this, and so they have to go to the parents to to get them to understand what's going on. So clearly they know that these minors have no ability to be able to comprehend the long-term effects that are going to happen to their body if they go through with these treatments. Yeah,
there were a couple of jaw-dropping moments in those videos. One is when she acknowledged that medical professionals will perform double mastectomies on girls that are minors.
Yes.
So that was acknowledged. And then to your point, she kind of said, because I watched the video after you brought it to my attention, that a hard part of her job is when you get kids as young as 9 years old, and she kind of put it's hard to get the consent part, you have to talk to the parents because they don't fully understand. Let's just play a clip of that video.
The part that's hard for me as a clinician is that I have to do a full consent. So I have to make sure that they understand the risks and benefits, not only of the puberty blocking medication, but the cross-sex hormones, sex reassignment surgery, fertility later. And when you have a 9-year-old coming into your office for the very first signs of puberty in a girl and they're not happy with it, they don't really have the ability to understand all of that. So I take that as much as I can, and I at least inform the parents about it and get the kids in a conversation about it. The puberty blocking medications are completely reversible. If they change their mind, they'll go through puberty just like they would have otherwise, no harm done.
Okay, so that video was a little hard to hear, just to kind of summarize in case you couldn't quite hear what she was saying. Again, you hear her acknowledging right there that the hard part of her job is getting the full consent in the case of these really young kids who can't really understand the full ramifications of gender transition and hormone blockers. Now, specifically, you might have heard her say the phrase completely reversible, referring to puberty blockers, that it's completely reversible. I'd love to hear you respond to that.
She admits, actually acknowledges that there can be some long-term impacts.
In another video, that's the ironic part.
Yeah, but as far as the reversible part, I mean, we're seeing studies that are coming out now that are saying, no, this stuff is not reversible. Yeah. Once you start down this path, you start down the path of infertility, of doing significant harm to your bone density. There are major physiological effects from these treatments that cannot be reversed.
Yeah, I was just in another segment of her presentation. It was kind of ironic. She did allude to the fertility difficulties that kids can experience later in life, but there's also stuff like now concerns coming out over bone growth and brain development and things like that.
Yeah, and this points to the fact that this is still purely experimental. I mean, many of the drugs that they're using are not FDA approved. They're off-label, which, there are some drugs that are okay, that are off-label that actually have been tested over time. But this is purely experimental.
Yeah.
This is not something that we need to be doing on our young kids and going through and just destroying their bodies and having these long-term effects to the point where they're sterile, infertile, and they have disfigured their bodies. And we've got to stop it.
Well, of course, we mentioned that this video was from several years ago, but even if you go today to the UVA Children's Health website, you will still see that they're doing this type of so-called gender-affirming care. We're going to put another couple of images on the screen here. You will see they say they treat people starting at age 11, and then their list of services. Todd, help us understand the harsh reality behind what's happening here. Why should people care about this?
Well, I mean, I think really, bottom line is we're causing harm to these young kids. We think that these treatments are going to actually help them, but the truth is that they're causing more harm. We don't know what's going to happen to their physiologically, to their body, to their bone density, to their muscle growth, to their brain development. There are so many effects from these treatments that we just don't know about.
Hormones are a serious deal when you take them away or increase them.
And the reality is we don't have the long-term studies to be able to tell us what really is the outcome. We have personal testimonies now of detransitioners coming back and saying, this is not right. We should not be letting our kids go down this road. My voice has not come back. I will never be able to grow in a certain way, or I may never be able to have
male
kids.
Female organ,
I mean, we've heard Chloe Cole mention that before about how she'll never be able to have kids. This is the dangerous road that we're going down with all of this.
I did see a whistleblower from a different hospital in another state saying that they overheard a doctor say, "We're flying the plane while we're building it." That's just incredible. Yeah.
That really is scary. Again, we're exploiting these young kids while scientists and medical practitioners are trying to, come up with the next best invention, medical treatment. And that's just not right.
Now, we have the story of Chloe Cole, which we featured in a previous podcast that gives us that up-close and personal example, but the statistics are also telling us this story. Tell us a little bit about some of those studies.
Well, the first one is we see studies come out that demonstrate that 80 to 90% of these young kids that are struggling with gender dysphoria, that actually, if they are left and provided counseling, and if they're left to be able to develop on their own, actually to go back to their biological sex, or they embrace
kind of outgrow it.
They outgrow these challenges, and they actually lead some good lives. So we have that data out there. Studies that are also revealing that it doesn't really help with suicide. We're seeing that these studies, through studies, that gender-affirming care really is not helping young minors overcome suicide tendencies, that actually it's causing more harm.
And that's the thing, Todd, is they keep selling this really to kids and their families as some kind of miracle cure-all, as a way to just magically prevent suicide risk. And the evidence just doesn't bear that out. And, Victoria and I had talked about this on a previous podcast where there was this study that came out in April showing that those who underwent gender surgery had a suicide risk actually 12 times higher than comparable people who did not. That is a significant difference. Again, the bottom line is it's not a miracle cure-all. It is irresponsible and damaging to present it like it is going to solve all these underlying issues that you might be struggling with. It's a disservice to people.
Yeah. a few years ago, Dr. Jay Green had a study that he put out showing that states where minors are allowed to get health care without parental consent after cross-sex treatments had become available, that the suicide rates among the minors actually spiked. So especially when you compare them to states without those sort of provisions, and I think we even have an image up on the screen, a graph that demonstrates that spike among the suicide rates. And it's very telling that when you put these policies and allow for these types of practices, that it's leading actually to more suicide tendencies, not less.
Yeah. And I think our heart here is we want every child to be protected, to be safe, to get the compassionate care they need. But when you are telling them that so-called gender-affirming care is going to do something that the evidence shows that it isn't, and pushing them on this path to irreversible sterilization and worse, just the damaging of their bodily organs, or where they can't repair that. That really is the opposite of protecting kids, and it's not full informed consent in any way. So the good news is, in addition to teens like Chloe Cole, we have some other courageous people stepping forward, speaking up, because it takes a lot of courage. And not just teens that have, are detransitioning, but also now people in the medical community speaking up. Tell us a little bit about that.
And that's what it's always really significant there, because they're putting their professional livelihoods on the line. And one of them that we heard at a conference was, and help me pronounce his name, Dr. Etam Haim.
I think it's Haim. Let's go with Haim. Dr. Haim.
Okay, Dr. Haim. And I want to, and look, knowing my last name, I want to be respectful of him and his last name, but he's a general surgeon at a Texas Children's Hospital. And he was a whistleblower, and he said, hey, listen, this hospital is providing these services, these medical surgeries on young minors, mutilating their bodies, and this is destroying these young kids. And he came out public with it, and this actually resulted in a investigation into him and his role in being that whistleblower. And so now he's got the federal government looking into him and investigating him.
And understand, he was a general surgeon at the largest children's hospital in the nation. And they had been under pressure before he came out with this, and had said that they weren't doing these things anymore. And then he saw them, apparently, what he has reported and says that he has shown evidence of to reporters, is that they were continuing.
They were saying that they weren't, but yet he had clear evidence that they were, and so he came forward with it.
I mean, according to the people he showed the documents, we haven't personally seen them, but it looks like he exposed evidence that they were continuing to do in secret these gender transition procedures. Let's just listen to a clip of him talking about that.
General Surgeon Etam Haim is speaking out against people who perform transgender procedures on minors.
These doctors believe they can become gods and create something new. It's not a doctor's job to harm people, even if the person wants it.
Harm, he says, that's often permanent.
They have to give up something that they have no concept of understanding, which is the potential loss of having a family in the future.
Texas Children's Hospital, where Dr. Haim worked, announced they were stopping their transgender procedures, prompting the resignation of Dr. Catherine Gordon, a staunch proponent. However, Haim said he discovered the procedures were still taking place.
There were a few residents who I knew who said that they had just finished implanting a puberty-blocking device in 11, 12, 13-year-old kid who believed they were transgender, who had all these psychiatric issues which were being unaddressed.
Haim gave documents, possibly redacted patient records, to reporter Chris Rufo to prove the treatments were still going on.
The largest children's hospital in the world was lying about a program that was manipulating, mutilating, and sterilizing young, confused adolescent children.
Within weeks, Haim was told he was the subject of a federal investigation, reportedly for violating patient privacy, which he denies.
I am being targeted because I was a whistleblower.
Todd, you and I heard him speak at a conference recently in person. And it was just so moving. And you have to realize the Biden administration is going after him, the DOJ department.
Yeah.
He is looking at possible prison time, 10 years of prison time.
Yeah. It's so sad. I mean, here they are. They're coming after him for exposing the hospital for these improper medical procedures. All the while, he's just trying to protect young kids. He's trying to protect young minors and not let them be exploited for medical purposes.
I mean, I think that's the frustration a lot of people feel like with justice in our society right now, because here you have the Justice Department targeting the whistleblower that's trying to correct a wrong instead of using its muscle to go after what's actually happening to these kids. It's completely reversed what it should be.
Yeah, we should be doing everything we can to protect these young kids, protect their innocence, help them grow naturally and be healthy. And instead, they're trying to protect this human exploitation of these young minors, and to the point where you're going to potentially jail a respected medical surgeon.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
Well, the good news, there is other good news in all this, though. There are other medical professionals speaking up, rethinking this. We won't go into all of them here, but I did want to mention there was some significant news the other day in the medical community, because a lot of times to try to shut down these voices like Dr. Haim, they will say, well, the consensus is in the medical community. Well, now there's a fracture in that consensus.
Yeah, I would say it's a significant fracture, because the American Society of Plastic Surgeons have come out now, and they have said that we've weighed the evidence, the medical studies and the research, and we cannot endorse this gender-affirming care that requires medical procedures. And so they are now saying, and they represent 90% of the people that are in the field in plastic surgery. And so they're coming out now. And so I think that this is a significant move that very well could potentially lead to some other medical professional groups coming out and voicing their concerns about this practice.
Yeah, apparently they acknowledged this in an interview. They declined to endorse the so-called, I guess, gender transition care or whatever. So if that's the case, if you see really intelligent medical professionals like Dr. Haim, a major association of plastic surgeons backing away from endorsing, why does it feel like we're still heading, full steam down this path here in the U.S. when you look at Europe? It's so crazy because they're actually backing away from doing this.
Yeah, and of course they were the first ones to really start pursuing this. But now we're looking and seeing the studies coming out, and we're seeing that they're now kind of backtracking, and some of these European and Scandinavian countries now are starting to prohibit some of these gender-affirming care procedures.
Okay, so you're saying they first started the experimentation, and now they're the first to back off of it, now that they're seeing the outcomes.
Well, I mean, and because they're starting to see what the impact is, and now you have Scandinavian and European countries that are saying, we're not going to start performing these double mastectomies, or we're not going to be prescribing puberty blockers.
For kids.
For minors.
Yeah.
For minors. And in fact, in Sweden, they have now, the hospitals have said, we're not going to be prescribing puberty blockers, and instead recommending psychotherapy for gender dysphoria. So we're starting to see the movement. Now the question is, at what point will that come over here to the United States, and when will American physicians and medical professional groups start to do the same?
Well, are there any signs of hope that we might be able to pick up on what they've learned in Europe?
Well, I would hope so.
It's kind of sad that the U.S. we wouldn't. Yeah. We're having to pick up on something in Europe. I feel like we should be the ones leading in this.
I think what we can look to the American Society of Plastic Surgeons as a great first step.
Yeah.
They're a fracture in that so-called consensus. I think the next step is we're starting to see some legislation in various states that seem to prohibit these medical procedures on minors. In fact, 23 of them so far have adopted legislation that is referred to as help not harm. There's other different names
for it.
Help not harm. Help not harm.
Okay.
And so they first of all, they make sure that they define male and female according to their chromosomes. They prohibit medical professionals from carrying out these medical treatments, whether it is puberty blockers or hormones, even to medical surgeries as well, for anyone under the age of 18.
Okay.
They create penalties if a medical practitioner does perform these treatments. And so you're starting to see some legal these bills would create a legal recourse when these practices are performed. And then it also affirms the value of counseling, making sure that counselors can step in and help them, guide them maybe away from making these decisions, which is still tricky here in Virginia because of some legislation and laws we have in place.
So that's encouraging because you say at least 23 states have done some form of that. So there's definitely momentum. What about here in Virginia?
Unfortunately, we have not been able to get that legislation passed, and we're going to have to see a change in the composition of the General Assembly to make that happen. And I think it's going to take a lot of education, a lot of getting legislators to understand the importance of this and making them understand what's happening in science with the studies that are coming out, what's happening in Europe, helping them understand that there is a movement to go back and try and undo some of these harmful policies. We've had legislation introduced the past few years. They don't make it out of committee because we have a very progressive legislature, especially in the Senate. And so we're not able to get it out of committee. And hopefully we can make some headways moving forward if we can change the composition in the General Assembly.
Is there anything people can do if they've heard what we're saying, they're concerned about what's happening at VCU, UVA, and the legislation? What can people do?
I would still say continue to contact your legislator, and let them know what you're hearing. Let them know that you disagree and that you think that this is harmful to kids. This is going to be an education campaign now, and so we're going to have to continue to have these conversations with legislators, as difficult as they may be. I mean, you and I this is not a comfortable conversation to have.
No.
And it's not going to be a comfortable conversation
Is it a painstaking conversation?
Yes. And I can tell you that the LGBTQ lobbyists are very strong in Virginia, and they have captivated the attention of many progressive legislators. And it's going to take a lot of work to try and move legislation like this in Virginia.
Okay.
Now, I would say that there's efforts to maybe change boards and commissions, medical boards and commissions that can weigh in on this. And in fact, we've been trying to help facilitate some of that and promote some good physicians that would speak logically to this issue. But even that is a long-term process because a governor can appoint people to boards and commissions, but you have to have consistent governors who are making those same decisions because there's always rotations on these boards and commissions. So the next governor could very well have a significant impact on these boards and commissions in terms of who they appoint and whether they're going to stand up for children, their innocence, their health, or are they going to continue to stand up with these medical procedures that harm them.
Explain that well. Thank you, Todd. Yeah. All right. Well, I just want to end on a note here. And I think we can point back to people speaking up on these related issues. And I don't know if our audience happened to catch the interview with Tucker Carlson and Bethany Hamilton the other day. It was a really interesting interview if you have the time to watch it. But, this is, you'll remember, this is the young woman that overcame her fears, and she talks about this, facing her fears after being attacked by a shark at age 13. And she also talked about more recently confronting the fact that the World Surf League was allowing males to compete in girls' sports. And as a woman who had overcome so much and has daughters of her own, and she wants to protect girls' sports and wants to be a role model in that. And so, I felt like her stance was especially meaningful in the backdrop of all of these Olympics things, which they talk about in the interview. But some of you may also have seen that Bethany Hamilton is going to be our keynote speaker at the gala. And so you don't want to miss this. So just to help us get excited about this is our gala on September 28th. We're just going to play a little snippet of the Tucker Carlson interview. So check this out.
So I partner with Brave Books. I wrote my book, Surfing Past Fear. It's a really sweet story inspiring children to overcome their fears. And then about 9 months later, the World Surf League starts allowing males to compete in the female division. And I'm the only one walking off that cliff saying, no, like this is not okay. And we're not about to allow males to compete I'm not about to have males competing against me willingly. And that was a whole nother just step of faith in that someone's got to say no.
And nobody else did?
Literally, I don't think one female, maybe like a couple lesser known, like kind of like not very vocal girls. Like, I think there was a lot of women not for it, but the unfortunate thing was the World Surf League had all the athletes say like, hey, you're not allowed to say anything deemed derogatory or negative towards the World Surf League, or we will fine you and disqualify you from competing.
So shut up and obey.
Yeah. And so that was like the contract they had signed the December prior to that year. And they literally get an email. They didn't even get a vocal warning like, hey, males are now allowed to compete in the female division as long as their hormones reach this certain level. And they didn't even get a warning. They just get an email in the inbox. And I'm like, oh, no way. This is not okay. And I'm not for this. And I think I lost some major deals that year. I think I had a deal on the table with Ford, and that never happened. And I think it was around that time when I was like, nope, I'm not for this. And I like made a public statement. And
what kind of reaction did you get to that?
I would say it was mostly positive, but there was some gnarly negative intertwined. But I feel like most of I had people out of the woodworks like stopping me in our local grocery store, like, thank you so much for speaking up. Like, we're so proud of you. But there was also some really aggressive, like I have like this shark gang on TikTok that like, they're like, we're on Team Shark.
Like, what?
And let me say, Candi, that is just a very heroic and brave stance that she's making. And so inspiring for our young girls, too, to be able to stand up in the face of all the culture and everything that's pushing against her to make that stand. It's inspiring. So I think this gala, I think we're going to get to hear more from her story. We'll also get to hear from Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears, which is very inspiring, and she never disappoints when she gets up on the stage to speak.
That's right. So if you want the rest of the story from Bethany Hamilton, hear Winsome Sears, make sure you're reserving your place. You can do that at familyfoundation.org. Just look for the banner, Unwavering Faith. That's the theme of our gala. So look for the Unwavering Faith banner, familyfoundation.org. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Remember, we are stronger when we speak together.